The question no 5-point Calvinist can answer. What is that question? Why is it useful in the apologetic defending the true gospel and the heart of our great God? Hello, saints and those seeking God. This is Mark White, Executive Director of Walkworthy Ministries here in Central Florida in the United States, with another episode of giving an account, defending the faith, not only to unbelievers, but to church people and believers, and doing so with gentleness and reverence, as Peter states in the book that bears his first name, 1 Peter 3:15. The question that no Calvinist can answer. I used it again just last week. I was in at a resort that was sponsoring the annual Ligonier Conference. Ligonier is a ministry located in Orlando that was started by R.C. Sproul years ago in the Ligonier Valley of Pennsylvania before he decided to move where the weather was pretty nice, where I am. And for 5 years or so, I went to that and volunteered so I can hear the speakers and so forth. But I didn't agree with their 5-point Calvinism. And so therefore, I had the challenge to interact with a lot of people who would say, well, God chose these people. And so finally at that conference, I had dropped my wife off to meet a friend of hers that was attending the conference, a longtime sister who believes the 5 points of Calvinism, which really came from Augustine. And actually, Calvin really wasn't a 5-point Calvinist. He was more of a 4-point Calvinist. Norm Geisler points this out in his book, Chosen But Free. Great book. Make sure you get the latest iteration. I think it's the 4th edition as he goes through and hones down his arguments. So as I was leaving to pick up my wife Sharon, and I was in the parking lot, I came up in the dark next to this large transport cart, like a golf cart, and it had a driver and 2 young men who were sitting in different seats. And I put down my window in this car here and asked, how do I get out of this parking lot? It was very confusing. It was dark. It wasn't obvious. And he said, well, go ahead and do this and that. Well, one of the 2 men that was sitting to the left of me here in the golf cart said, oh, excitedly, excuse me, are you at the conference? And I said, no. My wife is having dinner with our friend that's going to the conference. But then I said, because I had prayed silently, the Lord said, go ahead. But I would never go there anywhere because I'm not a 5-pointer. And besides, there's a question no 5-point Calvinist can answer. Well, that baits the hook, right? And so he said, well, what do you mean? Here's my response. Reasonably redone. I said, let's say there's a person who dies, and now he's standing at the great white throne judgment. He's lost. And he says to God, Jesus Christ, the Father, he said, how can you say you're a good God? How can you say that you love me? You haven't chosen me. You haven't quickened me. You haven't sanctified me. You haven't saved me. You've given me no choice. And now you're sending me with a new eternal body to the lake of fire forever with the devil and his angels to be tormented in the presence of Jesus Christ and his angels. And I told the guys, I said, Revelation 14, go check it out. How can you say you're good and loving? That would make you as God a monster. Then I was silent. I turned to the 2 men. There were some overhead lights, I could see them. And the man in the back said, the young man, that's a really valid question. And I said, exactly. Not only that determines what your identity is in choosing who God is and how he acts in his world. So that's the question nobody can answer. I have used that probably at least a dozen times in apologetics, probably more, to 5-point Calvinists, and even some believers, I think once or twice, who know of Calvinism, and they ask that because they can't imagine a God that would act like that, capricious and arbitrary, right? Norm Geisler uses an example, but I will change it just a bit. He says there are people dead at the bottom of a swimming pool. Let's say there's 100 people to represent 100%. And they're dead at the bottom of the swimming pool. And God says, well, I'm going to save and quicken and only save this one, 5 people, 5%. Because that's pretty much what I think is saved in the world. Maybe 10%, but I don't even think it's that high when you really look at the requirements for entry into the kingdom. And what God does is he ignores the other 95 or 95%. So that's double predestination. No matter what Sproul says, and even Jonathan Edwards in his tortured writings and logic to try to get around that, it's ridiculous what he writes. It really is. It's, as brilliant as Edwards is, he's just a fool in this case. So therefore, it's double predestination. God predestines 5 to salvation. And, the Calvinists will say, well, he just doesn't choose them. I said, well, then he willingly ignores them. He's God. He created them. He's followed them. He knows every deed that they've ever done. And now he's refused to quicken them, as 5-point Calvinist says. And they're going to be given an eternal body and cast into the lake of fire forever and ever. And I tell people, I said, that's not my God. That makes God a monster. And then you can add it with this and sort of bring it to an end. Satan wants every person in his kingdom, but God doesn't. Isn't that a great way to end up? You can say it to the 5-pointers. Satan wants every person with him in the lake of fire, but God doesn't want every person with him in the eternal kingdom. To be at his table with his son, the great wedding feast of the Lamb? Are you kidding me? What sort of a person believes that? Especially when they're confronted with the truth. Excuse me. It's one thing if you grow up being immersed and propagandized in a assembly, some sort of institutional church assembly, and even a house church assembly. I know some of them that are 5-point Calvinists. And they won't even talk about it. They're so arrogant. And you're so indoctrinated. But then if we have the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, unless you've grieved him and on the way to quenching him, which means you'll be erased from the book of life when you're quenched, when you quench the Spirit, that you can't see what the heart of God is. For God so loved the world, not just the elect. God so loved everybody that he sent his son to die for the world. None of this limited atonement nonsense. None of it makes any sense. So saints, hopefully this is helpful with the question that no Calvinist can answer. So this is Mark White saying goodbye for now with another episode of Giving an Account, Defending the Faith with Gentleness and Reverence, 1 Peter 3:15. Remember, we're one day closer to home and to him. Walk in a manner worthy and be holy in all your behavior. Goodbye for now.